and I welcome you to the fourth week of Take on Lent and our Lenten reflections, the holy work of prepare to love what is broken. In order to begin the healing of our relationships as families, neighbors, and a nation, we start looking within and mending our own broken places. Lent is a time set apart to repent, renounce, and restore. We may be broken, but we don't have to stay that way. This evening, I am honored to introduce you to the Reverend Anna Blaedel, who so beautifully reimagines our common life as the site of sacred encounter, and who collects wisdom from the intersections of academic, activist, and religious engagement, all for the purpose of healing. I first discovered their writings on Facebook last spring. This talented person named Anna Blaedel was writing for a webzine called Enfleshed and sharing the most soulful and relevant blessings and poems that spoke to our time in this unimaginable, chaotic new world of COVID. And you don't know this, but I quoted you time and time again when I would record my morning prayer services. I knew then that we had to invite you to share your particular wisdom and writings with our cathedral, I would say our national, international cathedral community. They are an ordained United Methodist minister who draws on theopoetics, relational philosophies of enfleshment, and anti-racist, queer, feminist, disability, and eco-theologies of liberation to offer spiritual nourishment for collective liberation and shared flourishing. Anna is the co-founder of and theologian in residence at Enfleshed and chaplain at the Wesley Center, the University of Iowa. They are completing their PhD in theological and philosophical studies at Drew University's Graduate Division on Religion in Iowa City, Iowa. Anna delights in waking before dawn, walking in the woods, savoring, as she says, fair trade coffee, strong coffee, dark chocolate, tending to their garden, being an aunt, sharing silence, poetry, candlelight, and good food with beloveds, and of course, retreating to their basement woodworking shop. So now, without further ado, I want to invite and present Reverend Anna to share her beautiful reflection with us. Go ahead, Anna.
Thank you so much. And dear ones, it is a joy, a holy and humbling opportunity to be with you this evening. And it is something like miraculous to be with you all, me here in my living room, we flung far and wide, you wherever you are, at your kitchen table or strewn on the floor or perhaps curled in bed or even in the bath. Blessed be, I hope somewhere at least one of you is listening to this from the bath. Togetherness is miraculous. And there is a part of me so grateful to find it any way we can, even behind and through our screens. And there is also a part of me, a larger part, to be honest, that knows and laments we are not made to live like this. All places condensed into here, all time zones condensed into now. But here I am, and there you are, and we are here now. And for this evening, I will celebrate us leaning into the connections that constitute us, the togetherness we so need to find and feel and tend in every way we can. Alfred North Whitehead, perhaps my favorite dead white guy philosopher, said, in a certain sense, everything is everywhere at all times. And one thing I know deep in my bones is that divinity dwells here and there and everywhere, with us each and all, in us each and all, through us each and all, connecting us each and all. And so it is such a joy to be with you in the ways we can this evening. I'm here in my living room in Iowa City in a little house built by my great grandfather, tended into home by my great grandmother, Czech immigrants who I never got to meet, who died before I was born, but whose lives and love made mine possible. This little house in which my grandmother was born, and my parents lovingly restored, and my oldest niece was brought home from the hospital too, in which I now get to make home with my beloved and community with my neighbors. This little home sits on land that was first home to the Bokojay or Iowa, the Oto, Omaha and Ponca, Pawnee, Sioux, Sauk, and Meskwaki peoples. My presence here today is a result of kinship, connection, courage, and care. And my presence here today is a result of the ongoing dispossession of Indigenous peoples who were the original tenders of this land. And, dear ones, tending together to the holy work of repair means lingering together in the complex truths that matter, even perhaps especially when those truths complicate, unsettle, disrupt, expose, and invite us into reimagining how we might be and live and labor and love together more honestly, more freely, and more justly. And here we are, a full year into the complex truths of this devastating pandemic, death and suffering and grief on such massive and asymmetrical scales. So many losses, and still accumulating the full breadth and depth not yet fathomable, speakable, comprehensible, and still some cannot even be bothered to place a piece of cloth over their face. I know there is a desire shared by so many to return to normal, and I too am so desperately eager to return to some of the practices that constituted my normal life just over a year ago. Hugging my nibblings, my parents, my sister, my beloved friends, cooking soup for the students I chaplain, and gathering at table with them each week, moving my body in rhythm and breath and song with other bodies together, sharing meals, sharing laughter, sharing tears, sharing ideas, sharing life without the flattening, exhausting mediation of screens. We have gone so long without so much that nourishes and sustains us. So much has been destroyed, so much has been deferred, so much has been disrupted, so much has been lost. What is in no way sustainable. But and as Native organizer and educator Kelly Hayes recently reminded, normal was a death-making disaster. After receiving the invitation to share with y'all this evening, and after saying yes with delight, I learned that between when I said yes and now, a man who has participated in and encouraged incredible harm to queer and trans folk had also been invited to preach at the National Cathedral. And I won't bring his name in, but he has a wide platform and has amassed great wealth, in part by stoking anti-queer and anti-trans dogma. I contacted the lovely human who invited me to speak and told her I didn't know that I could continue, that I needed time to reconsider. We spoke honestly. I called on my people, especially queer Episcopalians, all of whom expressed they'd rather my speak than not. So I prayed and sat with the complex truths of responsibility and accountability, brokenness, and the holy work of repair. I decided that instead of opting out, this was an opportunity to lean in and to imagine with y'all what repair is, how it feels, how it moves, what it offers, and what it requires. And I will say this, you cannot say you love me when you condemn the love that nurtures my aliveness and flows from it. June Jordan teaches us that love is life force, and anything that shames, that isolates, that demeans, that deadens our precious and holy life force, it is not love. And this, I know, an apology is not worth its salt if the wounding words and harmful actions continue, even if in a softer key. Faithful people, dear ones, do not disagree about the sacred worth of queer and trans lives and loves, nor about whether Black lives matter, because they do, divinely, ineffably, even when the world we live in undermines this truth at every turn. Nor about whether children belong in cages or anyone for that matter, or whether Muslims know God by at least 99 faithful names, or whether the rising tide of violence unleashed against beloveds of Asian descent deserves our immediate attention and ongoing intervention. Faithful people, dear ones, draw on their faith to dismantle these hierarchies for the sake of repair, the salve of salvation, which is liberation, which is healing. Now, faithful people do mess up, sometimes in small ways, but sometimes in devastating and deadly ways. And I do not believe that anyone is beyond redemption. And that is one of the most challenging and beautiful convictions of my faith. We do have so much to learn and unlearn differently depending on our life experiences. And what is the work of repair but the ongoing invitation into and participation in transformation? I am so grateful for the people who have loved me well when I mess up, who have been willing and able to stick with me as I practice and participate in the lifelong work of unlearning the impulses of death-making disasters, and practice the holy work of repair, an ongoing practice indeed. We need each other. And my, oh my, our togetherness can be messy, but if our togetherness is holy, it holds the divinity in each and every one of us as undeniable. So I won't linger more in that particular event, but I could not celebrate this sharing together tonight without also speaking to that constellation of harm. Normal, dear ones, for so many of us, is a death-making disaster. Queer poet and feminist prophet Adrienne Rich writes, "My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot. with those who age after age perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. And reconstituting the world, dear ones, cannot mean a return to what was. Our collective life depends upon us creating something infinitely more beautiful, more livable. We will all die, writes Ocean Vuong. How do we live a life worthwhile of our breath? Apocalypse, dear ones, means unveiling. As Catherine Keller reminds us, apocalypse is not some predestined doom, but the revealing of consequences of our own doing. Not punishment inflicted by a wrathful God cop up in the sky, but the after effects of our collective actions and inactions. How do we live a life worthwhile of our breath? For those of us practicing within Christian tradition, we are in the season of Lent, a season of rupture and preparation, soul searching, reflection, turning our attention to the shared precarity of our one wild and precious lives, and becoming more honest about how unequally shared our mortality is. Lent is a season of lingering in the realities of ongoing crucifixion and resurrection and coming into alignment at one mint with the holy work of repair. Lent is a season that invites us to remember where there is rupture, there is opening. A crack where sacred darkness mingles with holy illumination, an opening for truth and wisdom to emerge, an invitation into possibilities to become otherwise. These are the times, invited Grace Lee Boggs, to grow our souls. She also taught us that we need to transform ourselves to transform the world. And Lent is a season of germinating transformation. And that includes examining what tempts us. And I'm not talking about chocolate here, which, as long as it's fair trade, I am very much in favor of. What tempts us to accept death-making disasters as normal? What tempts us to turn on each other, turn from each other, to slip into numb resignation, to hand over our power and accept destruction and deny ourselves and each other the incredible joy and aliveness that comes when we love each other well and are loved well in return? Love is life force. And I'm using language of us and we because our togetherness, our collectivity, our connectivity is not only the holiest and most sacred gift I know, it is also simply given. We are deeply interconnected. Our lives are entangled. We constitute each other and affect each other cellularly, socially, systemically, in harm and healing both. Our lives and liberation are bound up together, and all of us, human and non-human, earthly creatures, soil, air, and oceans, caught, as King taught, in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. I'm using language of us and we, but it must be said too that the differences within and between us matter. And it is how we tend to those differences that determines what kind of we can become. Adrienne Marie Brown writes about the toxic substance of supremacy. So ubiquitous, she notes, that it has long been invisible to those benefiting from it and can seem desirable to those suffering from it. White supremacy, male supremacy, ableist supremacy, straight supremacy, cis supremacy, and more. The belief, she writes, that some of us are normal, are better, are justified to take and do whatever we want, including harm each other and the earth. Right? Workers we call essential are not paid enough to meet their essential needs. The 664 billionaires in this country saw their combined fortune rise 44% during this pandemic, while 22 million people have not had enough to eat and 13.5 million are behind on their rent, facing eviction in this country alone. And this country is stockpiling vaccines while other countries have none. And as the pandemic started raging, Breonna Taylor, an emergency medical technician risking her life to save our lives in the ER, was murdered by police while she tried to find rest in her home. How do we live a life worthwhile of our breath? Brokenness is normalizing mass death, turning towards systems of death, war, policing, profit, as though there is any salvation, salve, or repair there, when brokenness is ignored, justified, or left untended, it deepens and spreads. The work of repair begins when we refuse to keep accepting the death-making disasters that have become so terribly normal. Healing the harm of devaluing some lives and needs for the comfort or convenience of others. And so the whiter and richer and straighter we are, the more we need to confront our capacity for such callous disregard for life so boldly on display, not in order to feel bad or guilty or ashamed. That's not going to get anyone free. But because repair begins by acknowledging the harm done and the need, the desire to become accountable, to stop the harm by collectively transforming our practices of harm into practices of healing. And when we want to be part of building a more free and just and livable world, we can begin by casting our lot with those who, age after age, have been reconstituting the world. When profit and convenience tempt us to accept the death-making disasters of toxic oil and gas pipelines, we can cast our lot with the indigenous water and land defenders who have been tending sacred relationship with the earth and her creatures throughout generations of genocide, embodying what Mississauga Anishinaabe writer Leanne Betasamasake Simpson calls generative refusal. Refusing to inflict more harm or be subjected to more violence. There are so many possibilities for casting our lot with this repair work. One of them, check out the Great Plains Action Society, Plains Indigenous Peoples Resisting Colonization and Indigenizing the World. When fear tempts us to accept the death-making disasters of mass incarceration and the whole criminal punishment system, we can cast our lot with the Black abolitionist organizers and transformative justice practitioners who have been teaching that we don't need to reform prisons and policing as much as we need to learn how to live without them, to reimagine and practice the work of repair so that we hold each other accountable when harm is done. divest from punishing and harming each other, and invest in protecting and valuing each other, because none of us is safer or more alive when our response to violence is deepening it, retaliating by locking people away in cages. There are so many possibilities for casting our lot with this repair work. One of them, check out Miriam Kaba's new collection of essays, We Do This Till We Free Us, Abolitionist Organizing and Transforming Justice. And if I may, please order it from an independent bookseller, not Amazon. If your own community doesn't have one, consider Prairie Lights in Iowa City. They will mail it to you. When exhaustion and isolation and then scarcity tempt us to accept the death-making disasters of individualism, every man for himself competition, we can cast our lot with the disability justice advocates, mostly queer and trans and Black and brown and poor, who have been insisting that no body is disposable. And when we practice mutual aid, sharing resources and services and wisdom for our collective benefit, we learn that not only do we need each other, but in redistributing what we have, dear ones, we find we have what we need. There are so many possibilities for casting our lot with this repair work. One of them, check out Sin's Invalid, a disability justice collective unashamedly claiming beauty where others see only brokenness, and reframing wholeness from individual rights to collective care and flourishing. And dear ones, if all of this feels impossibly new or hard or overwhelmingly complex, if you are tempted to tune out, to shut down, to turn away, will you please first pause, breathe, breathe deep, breathe with me. When we breathe deep, we breathe in spirit, breath, ruach, ruah, pneuma. When we breathe together, we conspire together. When we breathe deep and conspire together, we deepen our capacity to sit with pain, as well as pleasure, as well as possibility. And I think, especially and specifically for those of us who are white, we cannot participate in the holy work of repair without confronting pain. The pain we have participated in perpetuating, the pain our people have perpetuated, the pain still being perpetuated in our name. These pains you feel are messengers, whispers Rumi. Listen to them. These are times to turn toward possibilities for collective common flourishing. Turning is repenting, till by turning, we come down right. Listening, writes Black feminist love evangelist Alexis Pauline Gumbs, is not only about the normative ability to hear, it is a transformative and revolutionary resource that requires quieting down and tuning in. As Bayo Akomolafe writes, the times are urgent. Let us slow down. Breathe deep, dear ones, we are in labor. The holy labor of repair is long and slow and risky and not without pain, and we have this one precious life over all too soon to birth something beautiful together. Everything worthwhile is done with others, Kaba's father taught her, who teaches us. Listening to the truths of love and pain around and within us is a spiritual practice. Spiritual practices increase our capacity for compassion, feeling with, so that we can learn how to move with and for each other, moving together with no one left behind. Perhaps my favorite story in the Bible, repeated by the writers of both Mark and Matthew's gospel accounts, is a story of Jesus listening. Jesus is overwhelmed, exhausted. He encounters a woman who is terrified and desperate. Her daughter is unwell, in urgent need of healing. In Mark's telling, the woman is Syrophoenician, mixed race, brown of color. In Matthew, she is Canaanite, unclean, impure, queer. And Jesus wants to get back to normal. He's tired. At first, he ignores her. Then he tells her to go away. She's not his problem, not his responsibility, not one of his people. Be patient. Stop being so disruptive. Nevertheless, she persists. She resists. She knows her worth. She knows her daughter's worth. And even though system after system, person after person has told her otherwise, she digs deep. She talks back. She bears witness. She truth tells. And Jesus responds by calling her a dog. Some scholars are desperate to soften or justify his actions, but dear ones, I think there is more power in facing the painful truth. He dismisses her and demeans her, and she knows better than he, and holds him accountable and invites him to imagine and create a more livable possibility. She models for Jesus how spirit moves, what faith in something more livable can open, and he models for us listening, quieting down and tuning in, which opens space for repenting, which means turning toward transformation, which is indeed a revolutionary resource. And in and through this, dear ones, healing happens. The margin teaches bell hooks as a site of radical possibility, a space of resistance. As Sean Crawley calls it, the radical potentiality of otherwise possibility that is queerness itself. Which, as a side note that is actually anything but peripheral here, when churches condemn queerness, charge and convict and turn us queers away, or try to tame, shame, quiet, assimilate, or include us on their own terms into their own deadly and deadening norms, y'all not only inflict grave harm on those of us who are queer, you cut yourselves off from transformative potential, spirit possibility, healing that makes aliveness possible. Are ye yet alive, church? Those who dwell on the margins, dear ones, have deep wisdom and cultivated practice of turning crumbs into nourishing feasts, of living and loving otherwise to death-making disasters. So, dear ones, when we feel overwhelmed, tired, shutting down, listen, listen, listen. Everything worthwhile is done with others. And thanks be, we don't have to figure it out on our own because, dear ones, none of us can figure it out on our own. We need each other, each other's wisdom and creativity and care, all of which is also to say divine wisdom and creativity and care. In their beautiful collection of poetry, perfectly titled Pole Dancing to Gospel Hymns, poet Andrea Gibson writes, when two violins are placed in a room, if a chord on one violin is struck, the other violin will sound the note. If this is your definition of hope, this is for you. For the ones who know how powerful we are, who know we can sound the music in the people around us simply by playing our own strings. For the ones who sing life into broken wings, open their chests and offer their breath. This is for the possibility that guides us and for the possibilities still waiting to sing and spread their wings inside us. In the 15th century, Nicholas of Cusa nicknamed God Posse Ipsum, possibility itself. When we lean into possibility, we tune into divinity, we practice the holy work of repair, building a future, a world, a life that we can't even quite imagine, that we've been told is impossible, but that we long for and live into moment by moment, day by day, beautiful and broken, bit by bit. Polly Murray, poet, activist, gender expansive disruptor of Jane Crow, Black Episcopal priest, described hope as a song in a weary throat. Even songs struggling to sing from weary throats can sound the music in the people around us. And when we don't know where to start, we can start small. The healing and repair and kindness and transformation we coax on the smallest scales unfurls, making, as womanists teach us, a way out of no way. None of us are capable of everything, and all of us are not capable of the same things. But each of us is capable of something. And together we need the something I, the something you, the something we are uniquely capable of. A friend of mine recently sent me a poem on small kindnesses, a small kindness itself. Hear these words by Danusha Lamaris. I've been thinking about the way when you walk down a crowded aisle, people pull in their legs to let you by. Or how strangers still say bless you when someone sneezes, a leftover from the bubonic plague. Don't die, we are saying. And sometimes when you spill lemons from your grocery bag, someone else will help you pick them up. Mostly, we don't want to harm each other. We want to be handed our cup of coffee hot and to say thank you to the person handing it, to smile at them and for them to smile back, for the waitress to call us honey when she sets down the bowl of clam chowder, and for the driver in the red pickup truck to let us pass. We have so little of each other now. So far from tribe and fire, only these brief moments of exchange. What if they are the true dwelling of the holy, these fleeting temples we make together when we say, here, have my seat. Go ahead, you first. I like your hat. Countless small, daily, ordinary exchanges, dwellings of the holy, fleeting temples we make together. What our bodies require in order to thrive is what the world requires, writes Aurora Levinas Morales. If there is a map to get there, it can be found in the atlas of our skin and bone and blood. rest, nourishment, tender care, safe shelter, safe harbor, small kindnesses, clean water, clean air, a world in which we can move freely, conditions that make it possible for all of us to breathe. Pleasure, novelty and creativity and beauty, poetry, music, connection, the company of other creatures also alive. This is what we do, Andrea Gibson reminds. We gather each other up. We say the cup is half yours and half mine. We say alone is the last place you will ever be. Adrienne Marie Brown calls it the spiritual work of abolition and writes, the fractal nature of our sacred design teaches us that our smallest choices today become our next norms. The fractal nature of our sacred design. Fractals repeat on micro and macro scales, structuring life in stunningly beautiful and miraculous and mysterious ways. Our patterns repeat. They resonate and reverberate and amplify. Fractal from fractus, meaning broken or fractured. Fractures untended proliferate pain and brokenness all the way down. And this is not just a metaphor. The legacies of trauma can be passed down for generations, can change how our genes express themselves, signaling destruction and fear for generations to come. If epigenetic trauma is real, however, so too can be epigenetic healing. Repair, tender care proliferates too. The work of repair we practice here now makes a more livable here and now, but it also makes possible a future and reaches back into the past too. The legacies of violence structuring the past can be tended to now for the sake of livable lives here and to come. Our sacred design. At our most elemental, 99% of our precious, precarious bodies are hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen. Our cells are composed of particles that have existed for millions of millennia. We are made of stardust and the Big Bang. We are cosmic, miraculous, mortal, divine. We are the beloveds we have loved and lost. We are the beloveds we will yet birth. Beauty and connection and goodness and belovedness are written into our DNA. Yours and yours and yours and mine and ours. How do we live a life worthy of our breath? This Lent, I've been lighting candles in a bowl, cupping ashes, tulsi, soil, and salt, elemental. Death mingling with life, the remnants of fire holding the beeswax that becomes flame, holy basil cleansing and healing, soil where life begins and ends, salt of the earth. Salt of our tears, salt that keeps our glorious, aching hearts beating. The past is alive in us. The future is too. We are creating it with every breath, every act of generative refusal, every act of care, every small kindness, every meal we share, every time we open our chests and offer our breath, never alone, for the sake of each other and all that is yet possible, and so much is indeed possible. But transformation is not inevitable. And dear God, so much is still ahead. Betrayals, denials, arrests, public performances followed by quiet abandonment, abdication of responsibility by those in positions of religious and political power, weeping, mobs calling crucify, taunting, lynching, death. But so too, a murmuration of believers and healers, cupping healing herbs and holy spices, finding each other, moving together, grieving together, caring together, sharing salve where it can be found, tending aliveness together in every way we know how. Will we live a life worthy of our breath? May it be so.
May it be so. Anna, I don't even know how to begin to thank you. Your reflection was exquisite. It was absolutely exquisite. And I took notes as fast as I could. I learned so much. I'm going to try to just dig in while we have some time. Thank you. I can see all of the comments in the chat. I think everyone is overwhelmed as I am. So let me just dig in. I'm going to look at my notes. And friends who were there watching, I thought of so much of what you said, and I agree with all of it. And I went from being, how are we ever going to get out of this? I mean, true, just feeling helpless, discouraged, overwhelmed, like you said. Because when our own country was founded on this death-making disasters that you talk about.
That's right.
So can you, and I think why I feel better now, because you took me on this journey and I think I can get there where I need to be because of this collective breathing that we do together, which I thought was just brilliant and beautiful. But when half of our own country can't even deal with the 1619 project and has to rewrite history, and then just the colonization, I mean, the wiping out of indigenous peoples from Mexico, do you know what I mean? It's overwhelming. So, friends, hold on, stay with me, because we're going to end on this good note. But can you just say more about that, this death-making disaster, and how you've been able to reconcile that with who you are and what you represent as a queer theologian and a queer poet, and how you found the salve to keep going every day. I mean, we need this hope. We need you in our lives. Okay, I'm going to stop talking.
No, and I need you, right? Collectively. I don't have it figured out, and I think that being with each other in those processes, and moving constantly between looking at the smallest scale where we have the most impact and where we live our lives while always also widening it to the
Mhm,
largest scales of history
mhm,
and right of time and of place. I don't think that there is any one way of doing
mhm,
it, and I think we're finding our way, and that's where each of us has something to offer and we need what others have to offer. So like I have learned everything that I know from the people in my life,
mhm,
and from the books I read, from the wise people, including then kids, right? Like we're just constantly learning that. And I think anytime we think that there is either one way or
mhm.
one truth,
Right.
that that starts to get us off course and off the
Mhm,
way.
mhm,
I also think about how anything that has, so when we think about the legacies of slavery, of colonization, that have taken centuries, generations of
mhm.
perpetuating and violence, of death, that cannot be healed
Right.
overnight. And it will take lifetimes. Dear
Mhm,
God, I hope not as long as we have spent creating those
mhm,
death-making disasters. But I think the desire for like a quick fix
mhm,
or a simple or single answer is itself part of that death making disaster. It
mhm,
leaves like white people thinking that we're the saviors and that if we can just have control, or like put together the plan. And so I think for me, so much of sacred wisdom is turning to the people who have had the wisdom that I have needed,
mhm,
and then
mhm.
sitting with that. So I think of like the impossibility of Harriet Tubman, while the Civil War is raging at the height of the fugitive slave laws, singing "My people are free." And
Mhm,
knowing that truth as a present reality in her bones,
mhm.
while like nothing about that truth was reflected in the world around her, but
Right.
she knew it and then uh, labored to make it so.
Mhm, mhm. Thank you for that. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Um, so can you talk about, I love that you call yourself, I mean, I get it, a theologian poet, poetics. Is that the term? Because I could tell at the end of your meditation, because I've read your poetry,
Mhm.
that you speak in poetry, you think in poetry. Is that right? It certainly seems to me. Is it the combination of theology and poetry?
Yeah, in some ways, I'm trying to write my dissertation on that and really struggling because the language of the academy is not my my first language or my native language.
Mhm, mhm,
So theopoetics is this like there are different strands. It means different things to different people, and different kind of communities of thought. But I think about theopoetics and like Catherine Keller, who's my advisor, is a great person to read
mhm,
her work on theopoetics. But it poiesis is from making, right? And so I
mhm,
think about that creative capacity of making language, making meaning, making God, um, that doesn't just assume that there is this thing, whether it's God or words or meaning that already exists apart from us, but our participation in it makes it what it is.
Mhm.
Um, and for me, there is a strong component of poetic language that invites us to feel. I think about Audre Lorde, who certainly didn't call herself a theopoet or a theologian, but I read as a theologian and theopoet. In her essay, Poetry is Not a Luxury, she talks about the white father taught us, I think, therefore I am. The Black mother, the poet within each of us, whispers, I feel, therefore I can be free.
Oh,
Something
mhm.
about that, like the felt sense of what is possible and felt sense of freedom, that whether we're like, I generally don't call myself a poet. I feel like there are poets, including some listening here, who have cultivated over years really the craft of poetry, and that nourishes me.
Mhm.
I think of poetry as sacred text. But again, Audre Lorde also talked about the sterile wordplay that some call poetry. Like just having a poem itself doesn't like
Right.
capture that feeling of freedom, but some prose does and some poetry does. So
Mhm.
hopefully I can finish chapter 2 of my dissertation and like give it to you as my response to
I
Theopoet.
hope so. Oh my gosh, I would be so honored. Um, okay, I just want to address this. Um, can you just, I didn't quite get the notes, but you said, talking about Lent and rupture, there's an opening in sacred darkness can intermingle with holy imagination. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I think so. That sounds right.
That sounds right. Um, I think that's one, it's beautiful, but two, I think that's just life, isn't it?
Yes.
That that is life, but I've always thought we never use our holy imagination enough. We live a life without imagination too frequently. Um, so I really appreciated that. Okay. You talked about love as a life force, lives and liberation bound up together, because liberation is a big theme for you and in flesh, isn't it?
Mhm. Yes. Spirit and flesh seek to provide spiritual nourishment for collective liberation. For me, I can't think of salvation in any way that isn't liberation, which is always collective and always about spirit and body, the material conditions of the world and the spiritual conditions that we're in.
Mhm, mhm. Okay. Margaret is sending me some questions.
Okay.
How can we transform ourselves when we can't control the actions of others? I mean, I think that speaks a lot to my frustration. Um, how can we hear others and learn when we don't know what we don't know, when this is so overwhelming?
Yeah. Hmm. Again, I think there's no one way and it takes a lifetime. But I do think there's something about something freeing, and this is all of this is ongoing practice
Mhm,
for me. Like when you talked about despair, I mean, my God, I can sink into despair.
mhm,
And then it's a matter of for me remembering
mhm,
um, what else I believe that isn't just despair. And that also means turning to other people for the wisdom that I am needing. But I think that question of transforming ourselves is it has something to do with spiritual practices. So
mhm,
to for each person that'll be different, um but to know what it is that grounds you and guides you and then show up to that practice
mhm,
as a kind of discipline, so that we are showing up for transformation when it's possible. Sometimes that's just a slog,
Mhm.
but it isn't always, right? And I think it also, for me, always is collective. We need each other, we need
Mhm.
community, and so many forces in our world. And then, especially in like white Christianity, whiteness that is individualistic, that teaches about personal salvation and
Right.
personal faith, like that's not going
Mhm.
to get anyone free.
Mhm.
And my mom and I were talking about repair for this when I was stuck. I asked her questions while we were walking together on the phone in different places, and for my mom, the church plays a fundamental role in that. And she needs that. It's part of why I lament that the
Yeah.
United Methodist Church is how it is, because she is one of those many people, along with my dad. They are there all the time. They are working to create a better denomination.
Mhm.
Um, but they find it really hard to keep going and question. That's their sense of community and collectivity. But they're grappling with their sense of responsibility and accountability. How can they stay part of this thing that has sought to destroy me and so many of the people they love? And yet, right, there is this beautiful local community there that holds them. And so for my mom, like she needs the church and she wants everyone to have the church.
Mhm. Oh,
and
yeah.
and I, partly where I am right now and what the last 5 years of my life have looked like under charge and complaint from the church, I am finding that collectivity in large part elsewhere, um, in activist communities, in relationships, in the people, with a clear sense of like who my people are.
Right.
And yet
Your
I'm also
kin. I love that you call them your kin.
absolutely chosen family, and that's one of the gifts of
Yeah.
queerness. So many queer people have not had their families of origin to be
Mhm.
family. And
Mhm.
I'm lucky and grateful that my family of origin is family. And that's
Yeah.
part of my kinship. But we have learned to make kin with each other
Mhm.
in ways that are beautiful and stunning. And so those are places that hold me. And
Yeah.
the Wesley Center, like shout out to them and to the board I work with there. They have done incredible work to live otherwise and to share in risk and to keep me from being alone in risk.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, there are so many different opportunities we have to be there for and with each other, and
Yeah.
that is life saving.
Well, and I think it's important to mention for those who don't know your story that you were sanctioned because you performed a same-sex marriage. Isn't that
That
right?
was that
Or
was
is
the
that-
second complaint. So there were three complaints. The first was I gave a little 3-minute speech on the floor of the Iowa Annual Conference at Annual Conference in 2016 because the General Conference had just happened. And I realized like we were moving through all of Annual Conference as though none of it had happened, as though queer people didn't exist. And
Mhm.
so I named on the language in the United Methodist Book of Discipline is that the practice of homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching, and you cannot be a self-avowed practicing homosexual and be ordained clergy. I'm sorry to even like utter those
I
words out
know. I
loud with
know.
their harm. So I named that I'm a self-avowed practicing homosexual, none of which is my language. And that was not new or news to anyone who knew me or had been paying
Right.
attention. I was out. But within minutes, I think, three clergymen in the Iowa conference had scribbled on a torn sheet of paper. They misspelled my name, but it was enough to be a formal charge because the rules of the denomination
Oh gosh.
are themselves harmful and unjust. So that was the first complaint, was for being queer. The second complaint was officiating a wedding, including for one of my dearest friends with
Right.
whom I went to seminary. And then the third complaint was also for being queer.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I'm sorry you had to utter those words again, but I want everyone to know, because the church does hurt people, I'm so, I feel privileged that you had the bravery to bring up the Max Lucado incident, because it about killed us, and it was really difficult for the dean and for our bishop and everyone, and we're still working through that. And this reflection I'm going to send around in our diocese and to all my colleagues and the dean and everyone, because what you've said is so affirming without condemning. And there's hope for even us, and which is very Christ-like. So thank you. And because we have to name it. Um,
I appreciated your like honesty and engagement with
oh,
me.
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't have invited you. I mean, that's just it. I could tell I didn't know you, but your writing and who you are. I was like, I got to know this person. And yeah, no, it's amazing. You're amazing. Okay, so here's a question. Institutions like the Episcopal Church say they are affirming and supportive, but there is still so much pain. How, as allies or those that affirm, can we continue to show that our work is not passive? Because that's something we're working on now. Our work is not passive as allies.
Yeah. Yeah, I think ally like can't be an identity or a label like chosen. It's a verb, right? Like
Oh, that's
ally
good.
is as
Yes.
ally does. And so um I know who my allies or accomplices
Mhm,
are, and I know that there are plenty of people who have claimed to be allies who have not put that in action.
mhm,
And so it's so much more important, I think, to show up, and to keep showing up in those ways, rather than try to like perform it or have it be big
mhm,
or then have it be about, right, as someone who is seeking to ally with and be in solidarity with siblings, Black, Brown,
mhm,
Indigenous,
mhm.
BIPOC folk. Um, if I make it about me trying to be an ally, that is still centering me. And I
Oh,
need
good.
to show
Yes.
up and like listen, to not assume that I know what is needed or what allyship will feel like, um, but
Mhm,
to do that long work of building relationships. And I think the like deepest spiritual work we do is to become trustworthy
mhm,
to
mhm.
each other.
Oh, yeah. I'm
So
taking notes.
there's
Yes.
some small things like um yeah, reaching out in care, asking what you need, learning people's pronouns, including if pronouns are a new thing, or if you think you've never met a trans person, showing up with love and care, and listening to what people are saying they need.
Mhm, mhm. I saw some in the chat. Someone asked you, thank you, Margaret, to comment on the Pope. I loved the little poem, the short poem you wrote, the,
Oh,
the Catholic Church and the
yeah.
latest um, papal bull. I don't know what it was, what you'd call it, but his statement about LGBTQ folk. Can you, I mean, so many people are upset over that, obviously. So can you speak to that? And friends, we're going on for a few more minutes, so hold on, because we've got a lot here.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't surprised at all, and like it's consistent, unfortunately, with what the Pope has said before. And I have been really grateful that this Pope has done meaningful work around ecology and the planet. We desperately need that if any of us are going to keep doing
Right.
life. Um, we need
Mhm.
that. And I've also appreciated work that he has done around immigration and poverty that matters. But like, I, of course, I'm not going to look to the Pope for my sense of sacred worth any more than I'm going to look toward a bishop of the United Methodist Church. Like, unfortunately, they continue to make it clear where they are.
Yeah.
And that doesn't, I don't want to in any way dismiss then the devastating pain, I think, especially for Catholic siblings
Yeah.
for whom this position of authority and power has once again denigrated our lives and our
Mhm.
loves in way that
Mhm.
have deep impact. Um, but I also like, I'm sorry, but if it's like someplace that won't ordain women and won't respect our bodily autonomy. Like, I'm not expecting
Yeah,
them
that's true.
to give a liberating word around sexuality and gender.
Yeah.
Um, and so, blessed be the Catholics who are deeply faithful and doing that work of resistance and liberation within or outside of the Catholic
Mhm.
Church. But again, I wasn't
Yeah.
right. Like, I
Well, we
wasn't.
had hope, we had, but if you think about the empire, just think about the empire, and it's about power and money.
Mhm.
That's why I get so discouraged.
Yeah.
But I don't want to end on this dark note. You said something here that I'm going to take to my grave, and I'm going to try to get this right. We breathe in the spirit. You named all the names of Ruach and Pneuma, all the spirit languages. And then you said, when we can breathe together, we conspire together.
Mhm.
When we breathe together, we conspire together. I mean, that makes me want to cry. Um, because if you think about it, with, then you said the simple cloth on our face, we haven't been breathing together
Right.
in over a year. I mean, that's profound.
Right.
We have not been breathing together. So that's why
Not,
we have to hold on.
and not to mention, like, the added layer when I think about breath and the invitation to breathe together. Eric Garner, George Floyd, those for whom the statement "I can't breathe"
Ugh,
has been
yeah,
both historically and in those particular moments not given any heedance.
right. No, you're absolutely right. And that's taking it to like you said, a historical perspective. Okay, one last thing, and then we're going to have Compline, um, because we've keeping you long enough. But I love Nicholas of Susa,
Mm.
and but I didn't realize, or I had, in one ear and out the other, that he named God possibility itself. I mean, think about that, people. We can make it. If our God is possibility itself, in the time he lived until now in the future, it's just it's a wonderful image. And it's an image we can't wrap our minds around, we can't get our hands around, because we shouldn't be able to. So I there's so much here. And I think you said that you may have a hard copy for us, because as we're all frantically trying to take notes and learn from you, because so many theologians you mentioned I don't even know, and I need to look them up and read their work. Um, and Margaret's going to try to get this reflection up tomorrow or Friday. She's got a busy day tomorrow, but it'll be up on our YouTube channel. And I can tell you this: I think you're an amazing human being, and amazing theologian, and just an amazing human being. And somehow or another, we have to have you back. Maybe you should become an Episcopalian. Come on over to the dark side. Yeah. Oh my goodness. No, I'm just so, that's it. I have to say, as much as we dislike and get frustrated over Facebook, if it weren't for Facebook, I wouldn't have found you,
Yeah,
because I didn't know about In Flesh.
sure.
So for that, we're grateful. Okay, friends, so we're going to have just a short, it's called Compline from our Book of Common Prayer, but we did something a little different. So Rose Duncan, our canon for worship, if you're still on this reflection call, I changed some pronouns that would be more inclusive. So I'm just giving you a warning. And there's Margaret. So we hope that you'll just stay for short prayers, and then we'll look at her. She says, "You go, Dana." All right. I don't want her to be mad at me.
It's my fault.
Because we even found a new Lord's Prayer. Okay, here we go. Let's all take a breath. Let's just like breathe together. Oh my goodness, so we can conspire together. The Lord Almighty grant us a peaceful night and a perfect end. Amen. Our help is in the name of the Lord,
the maker of heaven and earth.
Let us confess our sins to God.
Almighty God, we have
We have
sinned
sinned against you through our own fault in thought and word and deed, and in what we have left undone. For the sake of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, forgive us all our offenses, and grant that we may serve you in newness of life, to the glory of your name. Amen. May the Almighty God grant us forgiveness of all our sins and the grace and comfort of the Holy Spirit. Amen. O God, make speed to save us.
O Lord, make haste to help us.
Glory to God, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen.
In you, O Lord, have I taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Deliver me in your righteousness. Incline your ear to me. Make haste to deliver me. Be my strong rock, a castle to keep me safe. For you are my crag and my stronghold. For the sake of your name, lead me and guide me. Take me out of the net that they have secretly set for me. For you are my tower of strength. Into your hands I commend my spirit, for you have redeemed me, O Lord, O God of truth.
Glory to God, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen.
Love, you are in the midst of us, and we are called by your name. Do not forsake us, O love, our God.
Thanks be to God.
Into your hands, O love, I commend my spirit.
For you have
redeemed me, O love, O God of truth.
Keep us, O love, as the apple of your eye.
Hide us under the shadow of your wings.
Love, have mercy.
Christ, have mercy.
Love, have mercy.
And friends, will you join us in praying this Lord's Prayer? Heavenly Father, Heavenly Mother, holy and blessed is your true name. We pray for your reign of peace to come. We pray that your good will be done. Let heaven and earth become one. Give us this day the bread we need. Give it to those who have none. Let forgiveness flow like a river between us, from each one to each one. Lead us to holy innocence beyond the evil of our days. Come swiftly, Mother, Father, come. For yours is the power and the glory and the mercy. Forever your name is all in one. Love, hear our prayer.
and let our cry come to you.
Let us pray. Go ahead, Anna.
Be our illumination in this darkness, darkness that can be sacred and scary. O love, and in your great mercy, defend us from all perils and dangers of this night. For the love of your child, our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Visit this place, O love, and drive far from it all snares of the enemy. Let your holy angels dwell with us to preserve in us peace. And let your blessing be upon us always, through Jesus Christ, our love.
Amen. God of love, hear the cry of those who yearn for love. Fractured families, broken homes, neglected, unwanted, alone. God of love, justice, and healing,
Hear our prayer. God of justice, hear the cry of those who yearn for justice, persecuted and oppressed, exploited, ill-treated, broken. God of love, justice, and healing,
Hear.
hear our prayer.
God of healing, hear the cry of those who yearn for healing, physical and spiritual, hurting, weakened, depressed. God of love, justice, and healing.
hear our prayer.
Almighty God, to whom our needs are known before we ask, help us to ask only what accords with your will and desire, and those things which we dare not, or in our lack cannot ask, grant us for the sake of your child, Jesus, our love.
Amen.
Amen.
Guide us waking, O love, and guard us sleeping, that awake we may watch with Christ, and asleep we may rest in peace. Love, you now have set your servant free to go in peace as you have promised. For these eyes of mine have seen the Savior, whom you have prepared for all the world to see, a light to enlighten the nations, and the glory of your people Israel. Glory to God, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen. Guide us waking, O love, and guard us sleeping, that awake we may watch with Christ, and asleep we may rest in peace. Let us bless the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
The Almighty and merciful Trinity, Creator, Son, and Holy Spirit, bless us and keep us. Amen. She continues to teach us, doesn't she, Margaret?
It has been lovely to be with you all this evening.
Oh my goodness, it's been just truly our joy and an honor. I mean, just, yeah, I don't even know where to begin. It's going to take a long time to process all of this. It's just so wonderful. So thank you on behalf of the Cathedral, on behalf of the Vicar's office and everything we do. We're going to be thinking of you and blessing your ministry and your life and your beloved and everything on it. This is not going to be the end for us. This is only the beginning.
Lovely.
All right, everyone. We'll be right back here next week. We hope to see you then. Have a beautiful, beautiful, lovely rest. Good night.